And Pet to Wash Day, my friends and relatives. Welcome to the Red Road Radio Show. I'm your host, Lou Hastings from the Native Now Foundation. And we are back live, brand new week, brand new show. And we are trying all kinds of different things for our show to try and make, um, well, first of all, make it enjoyable for everybody who listens, but also to try and enhance our audience. I'd be like actually trying YouTube. We end up using this really could be very beneficial as far as archives and the like. So I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing what comes of this attempt tonight. The one thing that I did get a handle on be the bumper music um, for the breaks, but we'll have to figure that out as we go along. Because it's live, we have to figure out a way because I'm listening in my headphones here, but you can't hear that. So we have to figure that out, and Mr. Executive will put our heads together, and we should come up with some kind of right. We will set it up for success and not for breakage. Um, I just wanted to let you guys know what we're doing. So if I seem to be looking around, darting around with my eyes, that is why, because I'm sort of observing everything while doing the show, and want to make sure, number one, that we bring you the show the way we normally do, and second of all, that we can have this extra content. So right out of the gate, I want to give you our phone number 810-479-4394 as we give you at the beginning of every live show, because without our listening audience, we really are just sitting around talking to ourselves. So I want to make sure that you guys are able to reach me and talk to me and talk to the show with your questions, with your comments, just to make sure that we are constantly doing what has made this show popular over the last few years, right? Bringing you brand new content, bringing you new stories that you wouldn't get anywhere else. So if you are on Twitter, hashtag FYI Live will also put you in touch with the show. We'll be watching Twitter on one screen. We'll be watching YouTube on another screen. We will also be checking Facebook, because if you go to Red Road Radio Show's Facebook page, you will be able to see not only the stories that we are doing for you tonight, but any stories that we can't possibly get to. And I say this all the time because there's constantly stories coming to me every single morning. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. I can't get to it all, but at least I get to put it out there in our Facebook page so that you guys can at least go to it and read it. And I think that's really the most important thing, getting the content to you, whether I'm delivering it to you personally or not. At least you're getting it. Also, as always, you can go to fyiNation.com and jump in the chat room there, and we'll be able to see your comments live that way also. So, a couple of things. I had an entire show planned for you, and as per our usual, I've come across a couple of other stories that I need to bump some of the stories that I had already prepared to bring these to you, because these are sort of, they're more important to deal with. So the first one I want to talk about is from just a couple of days ago, from the Bismarck Tribune. Caroline Gruskin wrote this article. And I don't know if you saw this, Mr. Executive Producer, so this might be news to you as well. But Yeah, well, and this, you'll find this interesting for sure. So this is out of the Bismarck Tribune, and the headline reads that the civil case against Dave Archambault II has been dismissed by a federal judge. Now, if you remember, if you're a listener of this show, or if you were watching any of the news about Standing Rock last year, the Standing Rock chairman, Dave Archambault II, was was charged in federal court for um, for the protests that happened against the Dakota Access Pipeline. So let me just tell you what's in this report. A federal judge dismissed the civil suit filed by Dakota Access against the Standing Rock tribal chairman and four other defendants. In an order filed last Thursday, U.S. District Judge Daniel Hovland said the company failed to show that the federal court had jurisdiction over the case. Hovland dismissed the claims against Dave Archambault, Dana Yellowfat, Valerie Wolf Necklace, Clifton Hollow, and Jonathan Edwards. There is still a law to dismiss. So here's what the company said. The company claimed that 7 defendants interfered with pipeline work through their actions in the protest, the safety of workers, and costing the company business to the tune of more than 70, that the alleged losses caused by each defendant exceeded $75,000, which is required for a lawsuit to be valid in federal court. Quote, Dakota Access cannot aggregate from all pipeline protesters in calculating the value of an injunction against individuals acting independently, Hovland wrote. Tim Purdon of Robbins Kaplan, who represented Archambault and Yellowfat, said he thought the decision was appropriate. Quote, I don't think the jurisdiction was a close call. And he took advantage of the court system to get a temporary restraining order against his client, which was in place for several weeks and prohibited them from unlawfully interfering with construction. Purdon said this may have impeded the amendment rights. Vicky Granado, a spokeswoman for Dakota Access, of course, declined. He argued that the court should consider the total harm done to the company aggregated among the defendants. Right? And abusing the court system is exactly what they were doing. And we see the results the results are dismissal, dismissal, dismissal in many, many cases. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. There's a ton of people that are still waiting, that keep getting continuances on their court battles. But for Chairman Archambault, at least, that part is over, unless the company decides to pursue anything against him in state court. But, now that the pipeline is in, I highly doubt that we will see any court proceedings against any water protectors or anybody from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. That's my opinion. Right. Yeah, it's pretty distressing, but maybe somebody will think that a class action lawsuit is in order and call for it. You know what? You never know. These kinds of things have to be prepared over time. Evidence has to be compiled. You have to get your stakeholders in place and together. So we'll we'll see is about the best I can tell you. Um, but I wanted to get that story out there right out of the gate in the beginning of the show, because it's sort of breaking news on a story that we covered right from the beginning. Well, at least the beginning of when I got back from Standing Rock. I mean, we went right to broadcasting about everything that was going on, up to and including breaking news as it was happening while we were on the air. I mean, if you think about it, think about um, all the days that we broadcast, Thomas, and how many things either broke that day or were breaking at showtime or even while we were on air. It was truly remarkable that we had this show, an established show, and we were able to bring the biggest story out of Indian country to the airwaves as it was happening. If you had told me that something like that was going to happen when we first started the show, I would have never guessed. Yeah. Yep. As they say, warts and all, right? Uh, that's what you see is what you get, and sometimes the greatest things happen live. Sometimes the worst things happen live, and sometimes there are technical issues that are beyond our control, and it might even prevent us from doing a show, which happens on occasion. So so I think that's the exciting part about doing live shows. And you know what? There aren't many people who do them. outside of corporate media. When you think about podcasts and when you think about internet radio, a lot of that is polished product. A lot of that is, and there's, believe me, there's nothing wrong with it. And I have toyed with the idea of going to that format because you can produce a polished, finished piece. But there's something about that rawness of a live show that I like. The potential is that somebody could call in at any moment and be the worst thing that's ever happened to the broadcast, or the absolute best thing that has ever happened to the broadcast. So I really like that kind of thing, and you never know who's going to reach out to the show. And I will tell you, and there's a post up on fyination.com. You will also see it on our Facebook page and our website. Tomorrow night, we have guests on the show. I don't know if you even saw that, Thomas. Okay, so we have guests tomorrow night. Just to give you a heads up, people who are listening tonight, we have Lil Mike and Funny Bone. They are rappers from the Pawnee Nation, and they are known as Mike Bone. They are singers, rappers, and motivational speakers. They are going to be on the Red Road Radio Show tomorrow. If you want to check out their company, it is mikebonemusic.com. Check them out. Their videos are up there. They were contestants on America's Got Talent. And we're lucky to have them. And we're continuing to get these guests. I think this is probably going to end up, this May is going to end up being the most popular month out of any month since this show has started, according to our hits on our website. And that website is redroadradio.com. If you'd like to go there, you can see all the guests that we've had so far. And people continue to reach out to me, and I to them, to get you the best interviews that we can of people who are making a difference and making news in Indian country. So stay tuned for that, for different interviews, but certainly tune in tomorrow to check out Mike and Funny Bone, Little Mike and Funny Bone. That having been said, we're going to get into some other stories that we have for you today. Out of the Red Springs Citizen, this is about a week ago now, maybe 10 days. This story came out of Pembroke, North Carolina. The Lumbee tribe will hold the 2017 Lumbee Nation Economic Summit this weekend. Actually, May 24th and 25th, so we're talking Thursday and Friday, on the campus of the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. In addition to the Lumbee tribe, the summit is being hosted by U.S. Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, UNCP, and the North Carolina Military Business Center. And according to a flyer announcing the summit, it will focus on business activities that have come about as a result of the massive destruction resulting from Hurricane Matthew and the ongoing recovery efforts. So the summit will include numerous workshops and provide the opportunity for participants to network with members of U.S. Congress, tribal leaders, federal, state, and local officials, top-tier business leaders, business school and occupational practitioners, and highly successful entrepreneurs. There will also be a trade show traditional American Indian food sampling, and an American Indian artisan market. So this event, the reason that I picked this to put on the show today is because it's actually strongly supported by federal and state officials, and it's seen as, you know, a bridge or a conduit between today's and the future of new American Indian enterprises. So I think it's important to let people know that these events are happening. So if you are around that area and you would like to take part in this, please find out a way that you can. If there are any media outlets that will be willing to cover this, we would appreciate a heads up here on this radio show to find out how it went. This is pretty much a big deal because you usually don't get this kind of support, especially when we're talking about federal and state working together and supporting this event. Usually it's sort of left off of promotion, but there are going to be actual representatives from Congress there and tribal leaders. You don't see that often enough. And we need to have more of these, or at least we need to know about more of these things happening. And we don't, sadly. So keep that in mind on Thursday and Friday. If you are anywhere near Pembroke and the University of North Carolina, if it's possible, see if you can find out what's happening there on the ground. And I think before getting into our next story, because it's kind of a big story, we're going to take our bottom of the hour break, if that's all right with you, Mr. Executive Producer. All right, well, let's take our break now, and we'll be right back with the Red Road Radio Show right after this. Hey, if you are watching us live on YouTube, we haven't quite figured out how you can hear what I'm hearing in these headphones just yet. Right now, we are on a break from the show, which we have at the bottom of the hour every show. If you're new to the Red Road Radio Show, so I have a chance to talk to you here at the on video. We will eventually figure this out where you'll be able to hear all of the things, the back and forth between my executive producer and I, and guests. I don't know how this is going to work with guests tomorrow, but we'll have to figure it out, because I really want to get these up on YouTube and have people go to if you don't have a chance to listen to the show live, you'll have a reference point. You'll be able to go to our YouTube channel and hear the show, watch the show, if you will. Of course, as always, we're going to have the archives up on redroadradio.com. So all of our archives are up there. You can check those, all the shows that we've had before. So I just wanted to pop off real quick, let you guys know we'll get it figured out. You'll be able to hear everything. We're going to go back live to the show and finish out the show for you tonight. Okay? Hang in there. My mic is on mute, by the way, and we've got the Bumper music, so we're coming back in. And welcome back to the Red Road Radio Show. I'm your host, Lou Hastings from the Native Now Foundation. So glad you could join us live. Again, it is Monday, May the 22nd, 2017. And we are just going through some of the top news stories out of Indian country. And wanted to bring those to you not only live on FYNation.com, but also on YouTube tonight. So amazingly enough, I was able to get us up and running on the Red Road Radio Show YouTube page. If you want to subscribe to that, I would recommend that you do. You can see us fumble through our first few episodes, and then eventually, what I'd like to do is put a link up on the website so that you can watch it, you can listen to it, you do whatever you want, as long as the content is getting to you, as long as we are amplifying Indigenous voices. That's our mission. And I'm glad that all of you are out there and able to listen and be a part of the show, because it's important. It's important that we get all of the stories out there, because they're not. Unfortunately, they're not all in one place. But here's a place that we can sort of gather as many stories together as possible and bring them to you. Or send them to you on Twitter. Or put them up on Facebook. And then you can decide what you missed, what's important, and we'll get it to you. So here's an important story that came out about 10 days ago now, where Ryan Zinke, who is the U.S. Secretary of the Interior right now, took a trip out west and started visiting some sites. Because if you've been following the news, there is a worry in Indian country that this administration is going to not only reduce support for national monuments and protected areas, but is even thinking about opening them up for exploration, for possible energy extraction. Even though they're not saying that, we know that's what they mean. So in this piece that came out on May 11th, U.S. Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell said in a letter to Ryan Zinke, U.S. Secretary of the Interior, that they oppose any attempt to modify the Hanford Reach National Monument designation. The Washington Democrats told the Trump appointee in a May 10th letter that the Hanford Reach should be preserved as it is. They called the 200,000-acre monument a local, state, and national treasure that is well worth protecting. Of course, the Department of the Interior is reviewing national monuments, as we said, established in the past 21 years after an April 26th executive order signed by President Donald Trump. The review covers 21 national monuments in the West and could lead to alterations or outright removal of their designations. President Bill Clinton established the Hanford Reach Monument in 2000. Murray and Cantwell reminded Zinke that he called himself a Theodore Roosevelt conservationist in public and private conversations during his confirmation process. Quote, rolling back protections for some of our nation's most prized public spaces, like the Hanford Reach National Monument, does not exemplify President Theodore Roosevelt, the Senators wrote. Now, the Hanford Reach covers a large swath of land in southeast Washington and is home to the last 51-mile free-flowing stretch of the Columbia River. It's managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services and is home to 43 species of fish, 42 mammal species, 258 bird species, and is an important cultural resource to the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakama Nation, the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, the Nez Perce Tribe, and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation and Wanapum Band of Priest Rapids. So you can see that there are a lot of stakeholders here in this story. Some areas of the reach are open to the public for hiking, boating, fishing, hunting, and other recreational activities, and it's part of an outdoor recreational economy which generates $22.5 billion, with a B, in consumer spending in Washington. The Hanford Reach National Monument is distinct from the Manhattan Project National Park, a multi-site park established in 2015 to honor the top-secret efforts to design, test, and build the world's first atomic weapons. It includes facilities at Los Alamos, New Mexico, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. The Manhattan Project played a major role in preserving the Hanford Reach from development. The safety perimeter around the Hanford Reservation ensured the lands were largely untouched beginning in the early 1940s. And here's the letter that the senators wrote to Secretary Zinke and to the president, by the way. This one is titled, Dear Mr. President, we are writing to you to express our deep concern with your executive order directing the Department of the Interior to review prior national monument designations and propose changes to modify or retract protection of these lands. 16 presidents from both parties have used the authority under the Antiquities Act to protect iconic landscapes across the United States and preserve the natural, cultural, historical, and scientific values for the benefit of all Americans and future generations. During your campaign and during Secretary Zinke's confirmation hearing, your administration promised to emulate President Teddy Roosevelt and his vision for conserving public lands. We urge you to honor your promises and not alter the protections that previous presidents have put in place to safeguard these national monuments. These monuments are built upon the support of local communities and are economic drivers across the United States. Just yesterday, the Outdoor Industry Association issued the last economic numbers detailing how the outdoor industry is helping drive our economy. It found that the industry contributes $887 billion in consumer spending, produces 7.6 million jobs, and creates $65.3 billion in federal tax revenue and $59.2 billion in local and state tax revenue. All of these figures have increased since OIA's last study in 2002 and are critical indicators of the value of America's protected public lands. In 2016, national parks alone saw a record 331 million visits, contributing almost $35 billion to the U.S. economy. In addition, regions surrounding national monuments have seen continued growth or improvement in employment, personal income, and increased per capita income, and rural counties in the West with more than 30% protected public lands, and saw jobs increase by 345% compared to regions without protected lands. Weakening protections, modifying, or rescinding national monuments could damage the economy of local communities. In addition, despite claims to the contrary, all the national monuments designated during the past 8 years were designated after public meetings were held and input was gathered from local communities. And each of these monuments had broad local support. The people who enjoy these lands have actively participated in the public process leading to their designation. Outdoor recreationalists, local organizations, scientists, and tribes with ancestral ties to these lands all worked with prior administrations to ensure these lands are protected at the scale necessary to preserve its special values. The public has shown strong support for national monuments. A Colorado college poll in 2017 reports 80% of Western voters supported keeping protections for existing national monuments. Recently, OIA announced it would pull its trade show out of Salt Lake City because of efforts to rescind the Bears Ears National Monument. Americans care deeply about national monuments, and their voices should be considered if you proceed with any potential changes to the monument designations. Thus, we request that any process evaluating national monuments designated under the Antiquities Act should be conducted through an open, transparent, and public process in which all Americans can participate and provide their information and insight. In particular, it is important that government-to-government relationships with federally recognized Indian tribes be maintained through meaningful consultation. Now, we have talked about consultation on this show over and over again. This is what is lacking. This letter goes further and demands the input of the American people, which is proper, which is correct, seeing as everyone sat at the table with previous administrations and worked these protections out before they became law. The problem is anything could happen without consultation, and usually does. Part of the biggest snafu about Standing Rock last year was the fact that proper consultation with tribal nations was not conducted before permits were offered, honored, and before construction began. This is a problem. This has been a problem for a long time. And it can't continue. But little by little, we have representatives like these senators who are willing to stand up and call out when they think the government is wrong. So to Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, well done. Well done. You're doing the work of the people. If 80% of Western voters want or vote to keep designations for existing national monuments, shouldn't the people be listened to? 80%. I think it's important that we listen to what the people are saying. And that will tie in to our audio clip of the night. And before we before we get to that, I want to cover sort of an accompanying story to our audio clip. And it sort of expands on what we were talking about in this last article. This is from the Miami New Times, and it's by Deidre Funchen. This came out March 16th of last year. But it bears repeating because it is a constant struggle. And it talks about, well, it features Bobby C. Billy, who is a spiritual leader and activist from the Everglades. And I had the great fortune of meeting Bobby C. Billy a couple of years ago and sort of joining in a group of folks who are trying to bring awareness to a bike trail that they wanted to cement through the Everglades so that people could have a better look at nature, which didn't make sense to me, nor did it for Bobby C. Billy. So there was a very large contingent of us who walked across the state from the Gulf Coast to Miami to bring awareness to this. But this article is interesting in a different way. And the headline reads, Miccosukee holdout insists the 1800s treaty gives all of South Florida to the tribes. So, and I love the way that Deidre frames the story. And I want to share that with you. Bobby C. Billy was born in the Everglades, about a mile off of Tamiami Trail in 1945. For years, that was all he knew of the world. And indeed, just for the sake of our audio clip is of Bobby C. Billy talking before a council in St. Augustine, Florida. English is his second language. So remember that when you're listening to the audio. So this article starts out with them talking about Bobby C. Billy knew nature. That's it. He said children planted pumpkins and corn, hunted deer or raccoons, and stuck their feet into alligator holes to see if turtles were hiding inside. No limbs were lost and life was good. One day, when Billy was about 5 years old, the kids went further and further and ran into the highway. Chain gangs were cleaning up the side of the road. He said we looked at them, white and brown and black, all doing it. We didn't even know what we run into. Scared, the kids hid in a bush until their parents came home. Quote, we said we had no idea what that was. They told us, okay, get in the car. And they took us to Miami. And we found out that we were not the only ones living here. That's how Billy, now age 71, learned there was a world beyond the swamp. In the years that followed, he witnessed the founding of the Seminole and Miccosukee tribes. Today, he and just a few others stand out for having refused to join either one. They call themselves the original Miccosukee Seminole Nation of Aboriginal people. Some people call them the Independents. They insist that a treaty from the 1800s granted Indians all of Southwest Florida and beyond, and has never been superseded. Billy has dedicated his life to standing up for environmental and indigenous causes. And on March 20th, according to this article, he will host a 6-day, 80-mile walk for future generations across the state, which he did. Along the way, nightly fireside chats with him offer a rare, intimate glimpse into a deeply private community. And I will tell you, camping in the Everglades and walking every day and camping and walking and every night sitting around a fire and talking with Bobby C. Billy and the rest of the people who were on this journey took 5 days for it to be completed. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It was remarkable and such a learning experience. And I think people need to listen to people like Bobby C. Billy, who knows that there are two worlds, but he can see the difference clearly. And he's just trying to make other people understand. This story goes on to say, wearing a traditional patchwork shirt with his shoulder-length gray hair swept back, he settles into a bench in a park in central Florida's Lake Placid to tell his story. His ancestors, he explains, taught him to revere seeds and plants and natural cycles. Even ashes had a purpose. But Tamiami Trail was built in the 1920s, effectively damming the flow of water in the River of Grass from north to south. Everglades National Park was established in 1949 and Big Cypress Natural Preserve in 1974. The Park Service prohibited fires and instituted rules that ruined their way of farming. Bobby C. Billy vowed, "I'm not going to forgive you. I'm going to be challenging you as long as I'm on Earth." Drunk hunters would shoot and endanger them, Billy says, so families came out of the deep swamp and moved to villages along the trail. Job options were limited because they hadn't learned to speak English. His people had always honored an oral tradition. In my time, Billy remembers, they said even if I hold a pencil, they take my hand and slap it away. Billy never learned to read or write. He says English can never capture the true meaning of his language. Around age 14, Billy got a job planting tomatoes with his grandparents for 50 cents a day. We just survived at that time because we had to change our entire way of life, he said. In the mid-1900s, the U.S. government encouraged indigenous people to organize and develop constitutions. According to author Winona LaDuke, some of the South Florida indigenous people in 1957 opted to form the Seminole tribe and become federally recognized. Each person who signed up got $25 and became eligible for various federal benefits. Another group formed the Miccosukee tribe separately in 1962. Billy, however, found absurd the concept of needing to be recognized. Quote, "The seed comes from corn. Pumpkins come from pumpkins," he says. "Those things know who they are and what they are supposed to do. We already know who we are." "I remember the political changes well," says Billy. "There were big meetings and big people from Washington there." He says his people were misled. They thought they were securing their rights to live as they had always had. "My uncle started to go to night school. He started reading. He warned the elders that by signing they would give up their rights to the land. The Seminoles ended up with 6 reservation areas in Florida. The Miccosukees got several parcels, and a lease to use 189,000 acres of the Everglades. According to the State of Florida website, in 1970, the Indian Claims Commission awarded the Seminoles of both Oklahoma and Florida collectively $12 million for the land taken from them by the U.S. military. Billy remembers that day. Quote, Lake Okeechobee was making a noise, a loud noise. And a nephew asked, "Did you hear that?" They asked around, but no white people had heard it. An elder explained, "It was just letting you know something is going to happen." And then they saw in the newspaper that the settlement deal had been reached. In the years that followed, tribes modernized, kids went to school, Christian churches arose on the reservation. The Seminoles led a nationwide effort to build bingo halls and casinos on Indian land. The Miccosukees followed. The tribes became economic powerhouses. Nearly all natives enrolled in tribes. Enrolled members received dividends from casino profits. Still, Billy resisted, maintaining instead that an agreement authorized by President James Polk in the 1800s remains in effect and grants natives the rights to all of Southwest Florida and beyond. All of the people on the reservation want to be white, he said. To some, he says it's more important, the dollar, the nice car, the nice house, the restaurants, than God's gift. This is a person who is dedicated to Indigenous people and Indigenous rights. And I'm going to leave this here, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts, and we'll listen to Bobby C. Billy. So here we have a show illustrating the examples of those instances where people seek to halt, in some cases reverse, any advancement or gains of indigenous communities and tribal nations, and those who would stand up and defend these communities. Recognition from the Defense Department has always been slow to come, but over the last few years, it has been happening. And to have senators and representatives like U.S. Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell try and say not so fast in calling for alterations to abolish altogether national monument recognition and protection. Their efforts should be noted and applauded. Just know this, as the public at large, this is a daily battle. Thank you as always for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Red Road Radio Show. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.